Hey everyone, it's your very favorite history teacher. Let me see your transcript. I hope you had a very good Tuesday. Tonight, I'm bringing to you a very special person, Dr. Dona Murphey, who is also an Asian American woman, but also a doctor. And as well, she is also a wife and a mother, and also an educational advocate in her community. And she helps to fight for rights of students in in the ISD where her kids attend. So I'm gonna bring her right in. Let me take this down. Hey, Dr. Dona, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I thought you were gonna have your blonde hair. I was like, oh, she's a blonde now.
It's going. It's
blondes have more fun. They say. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little bit tired. I don't know if I mentioned to you that I've been struggling with COVID. I've had it since March, so it's been a challenge.
Donna, I am so sorry because I was like, okay, now I got a whole bunch of other questions to ask you. I'm just so sorry. I feel like I should be telling you to go to bed, throwing your blanket over you, propping up your feet, asking you, do you need anything? I'm a Libra. That's what we do. We take care of people. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay, before we get to your hey everyone who just came in, this is Dr. Dona Murphey. She's a wife, mother, a local educational advocate. And I'm in shock because she just told me she's tired because she's been battling COVID, and I didn't know that. And so we're gonna get to that because we probably do need to talk about that. But I wanted to talk to you about COVID for a whole nother reason.
Yeah.
And so, but first, tell us about yourself.
Gosh, I mean, I am what you described. I'm Asian American, second generation. Grew up in Houston. Have lived here all my life in the greater Houston area, with the exception of 4 years that I spent in Cambridge, Massachusetts, for college.
Wait, so you trying to tell me you went to
I was at Harvard undergrad.
Harvard? Okay, because it's like you just dropped Cambridge, like.
I came back to do my training in medicine and also in neuroscience here at Baylor College of Medicine in the Med Center. And did residency training in neurology and fellowship in epilepsy. And then thought that I was going to stay in academic medicine, and some things happened. I think that it was probably my first real taste of gendered injustice in the world. And I decided to abandon the idea of staying in academic medicine and went to industry instead. And in that transition actually ended up having a lot of flexibility in my time, and became very, very politically and civically active. I've always been active in the community, but not to that extent. I mean, I literally since, sometime in 2016 have been spending a second job's worth of time on my activism and my advocacy.
Okay. You said you were second generation. Where are your parents from, or grandparents from?
My parents immigrated here in the 70s from South Korea.
Okay. All right. And so what was it like growing up for you here? With parents who are immigrating from South Korea? Yeah,
it was I mean, I think that I was relatively privileged, even though my parents did not come with a lot when they arrived. They actually did not come together. They met each other when they came here. So my mom was 16 when she came, and she met my dad when she was in her early 20s, and my dad was in his late 20s when he came. And so I think in many ways it was like the first generation immigrant experience for many people. I mean, they were really just kind of struggling to make a home for themselves, right? So they didn't speak the language. They were very unfamiliar with the culture, and they didn't have a lot of resources when they first came. But they worked hard for many years and were able to establish themselves.
What kind of places was there? Okay, at least from growing up in Houston and also from history books, I know Houston has a very big Vietnamese community, very big Chinese community. Was there a close-knit little Korea or Korean town for your parents to like, okay, these are other people like me. I can hang out, I can be with them, and they'll understand me and my beliefs and my ways, and I can be secure here.
Yeah, when they first came, it was a very small community. So my mom came first in 1970, and there were maybe around 200 Korean people here, is what she would estimate.
Okay.
Now, to give you some sense of how that has changed, now there is an estimated approximately like 30,000 Korean people in Houston.
Oh, okay. And what did your parents like work as? Did your mom stay at home, or do you say they both worked, or like what did they work at?
Yeah, my father started his own like accounting firm, and my mom basically helped him to run it, like a small private accounting firm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like Jeff Bezos and his wife. They just
I hope not.
I mean, seriously, that's what he started a business, and she went to help him.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Yeah. I
know other things. And she was an accountant.
Okay, got it.
I'm sorry, I just went there. I had to go there sometimes. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I do. They're both younger. I have a sister who's also actually a physician scientist, doing her residency in ophthalmology in Oklahoma right now. And my brother is in, I guess, business or finance. That's what he's been doing, since he graduated from college.
Okay. So let me ask a question, because I know a lot of my other Asian American friends, I talk to them about how they grew up. And so is it true that for a lot of Asian American parents, it's like you have one of three things that you're supposed to do, or they are pushing you to do for a career? Either you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer. I'm serious, because that's what, unless they're wrong,
I have heard this. My parents never explicitly told me to pursue any particular path. Although I do remember having conversations when I was very young with them about wanting to be, many different things. And the one thing that they kind of stuck with and actively encouraged is me stating that I wanted to be a doctor, which is ultimately what I did. But I think not until after I had actually put a lot of critical thought into it. Yeah, because my reasons for wanting to do that when I was like in elementary school were not the same at all for why I went into medicine ultimately.
Okay. Yeah. Well, why did you ultimately want to go into medicine?
I actually wanted to do health policy. So I had in high school spent some time in Latin America and was really interested in public health. And actually did not envision myself taking care of patients directly. I envisioned myself kind of involved in like the kind of in a macro way with health. But I didn't end up doing that, at least not so far. Although a lot of my work lately has been public health related, because I've been doing a lot of COVID education and organizing and advocacy.
Oh, okay. That's great, because we definitely just reading headlines today about people not wanting to wear a mask, saying that Dr. Emmanuel lady last week, everyone just needs to take this malaria drug. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Oh, goodness. So I'm sorry, digging on to your life. So when you said you wanted to go into public policy, so when did you find time to, like you said, you got married and you had kids? Like, did you meet your husband in medical school, or did y'all were high school sweethearts?
Yeah, it was after high school. I was dating him through college long distance. He's from around here.
Okay.
Yeah, he's older than I am. So we were dating long distance for several years. And then I came back to Houston, was about to start medical school. I had deferred for a year actually in order to build a civic engagement program. that ran in, I think, 13 different schools. And
and what was it centering on?
It was really about getting high school students to educate each other and to educate like kind of near peers, so younger students, about injustices in their communities.
Oh, great.
So yeah, and I mean, I kind of left it to them to define what those things were and how they would tackle them. But yeah, I mean, there were some really wonderful like relationships that I still have with people as a function of that work that I did in that year off. And actually, after I started medical school, I continued that program for maybe 3 or 4 years, leading it explicitly, and then kind of left it to like, you know, if the students in the districts that were involved want to continue the work, then they can, and I'm always here, but I'm not gonna explicitly continue in any kind of leadership role.
So, okay. Yeah. But it's like you gave them the tools and the agency to continue on their own.
Exactly.
Once you left.
Right.
So it wasn't just like charismatic leader censored, and so when the leader goes away,
right,
then,
exactly.
Then the you know, everything falls apart. That's great. So you came back, you went to medical school, you guys got married. And when did you decide? I guess, you know, so did you get married after you graduated or became a doctor, or after you did your residency?
I got married right before medical school. So right after, a year after graduating, almost a year after, exactly a year after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from college.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what was your primary focus during your residency?
Residency was in neurology. So I was learning about the brain and different brain illnesses. There's a lot of overlap in our training with psychiatry. So we also did a fair amount of that. And actually, that's probably what I would have gone into if I had not gone into neurology. For some time, I thought I was going to go into ophthalmology, but it was really with the purpose of studying vision in the brain. I've always been interested in the brain. So, you know, psychiatry still is of great interest to me. Anything neurological, anything about neuroscience has always been of great interest.
Okay. So do you have, like, how many kids do you have, or do you and your husband have?
We have,
you don't have to tell me their names. You just, you know, you can just tell me.
Yeah. We have 2 girls. They are 15 now and 13.
You look too young to have middle schoolers.
They're in high school. They're both in high school now. They're 9th and 10th.
The 13-year-old's in high school?
Well, she's going to be 14 in a few days, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, tell her happy early birthday. Oh, she's a Leo. This is her season. Okay. Okay. So you said you began to get more active in the community in 2016. So was it something locally, state, or was it just like, okay,
I think
Trump won the election in 2016?
Yeah, it was before he won. But what pulled me into it largely, and it was kind of serendipitous, is that I was in this digital community called Pantsuit Nation, which I'm not sure if many people were part of.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, and there were a bunch of people one day talking about making state-specific groups of this group. And they, you know, this was prior to the election, but we all presumed that Hillary Clinton would win the election.
Yeah.
Still, I think there was a lot of interest in kind of building off of what had kind of spontaneously come together in that space. And it started, I don't know if you know anything about the history, but it really started with this woman, Libby Chamberlain, in Maine.
Yeah.
And she just put a couple of her friends into a secret group on Facebook to dress up in pantsuits on election day when, you know, when Hillary won, where that was the expectation.
Okay. Is it okay if I put the link in the chat so they'll know?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And
is there a Houston or a Texas chapter?
There's the one that's super active on the ground is Houston.
Okay.
The Pantsuit Republic Houston, yeah, is very, very active on the ground. But yeah, that day, people just started talking about these state-specific groups, and there must have been like 30 or 40 or 50 people who said that they were interested in a Texas group. But clearly, either nobody knew how to do that on Facebook to make a space for that, or they just weren't interested in doing it. And so I knew how to do it. It took me 30 seconds to start a group, a page, or a group, a Facebook group, sorry. And so I did that, and people joined. Like within a couple of weeks, we had 25,000 people. So, I ended up creating that space with a number of other people in the beginning who indicated to me that they were interested. Some of them are still very heavily involved. So Joseph Say, who lives around the corner from me.
Okay, yeah, I know Joseph, yeah.
Yeah, we both ran actually for Pearland ISD School Board. He's currently chairing Pantsuit Republic.
Okay, good. So there are other men like him who are also part of.
Yeah, it's for feminists, but you don't have to identify as any particular gender to be a feminist.
Okay,
right?
but men can be feminists too.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
So when you started the Pantsuit Nation locally here, what was your first objective then?
Yeah, so it was right before the 2017 Texas Ledge. And we knew that immigration would be a big issue. We knew that there were some really anti-LGBT bills that would be presented, and also very anti-women's choice, anti-women's health bills. So I think we kind of converged on those topics. There were some others as well that we kind of showed up on and did advocacy around. But yeah, we really wanted to kind of make a statement and be present, show up to support the organizations that had been doing work in these spaces for a long time, and to just really kind of ally ourselves with them, and not necessarily, reinvent the wheel, as they say, right? We weren't seeking to do that. We were seeking to kind of support what was already there, whether that was grassroots or more institutional through established nonprofit organizations. So we started that work at that time with the Texas State Legislature, but then have since done a lot of work in our more local communities at city council or at the level of county commissioners court. That kind of organizing has happened as well all over Texas, but I'm most familiar with what has been happening in Houston since I'm here in the greater Houston area.
Okay. What were did you do anything as far as speaking before the legislature, visiting representatives in Austin? Did you do protests? Did you do a voter registration? What exactly did you guys do in 2017?
We went to Austin several times in 2017 to do public testimony. We organized people to do public testimony. We went for the Planned Parenthood Action Day, or I don't remember now what it was called exactly, but there were, 2,000 of us there. And yeah, that was just, I think there were multiple opportunities to kind of learn about how advocacy was done through these various issues-oriented lenses. So we did a lot of that in Austin. We would go with different organizations that had different priorities around specific issues, and we would do advocacy at the Capitol on those things. We did also have a very heavy voter registration effort. We were very committed also to lifting up candidates, particularly women of color who were wanting to run for public office. So we had a whole program for not endorsing those candidates per se, but allowing them to use this space to get to gather volunteers and to
Great. There are lots of women, especially in the midterm elections, 2017, local, state, and national. It was just women were everywhere. And I think in Houston, there are 19 women judges.
Yep.
That ran, and they all got the job.
Yeah, that was amazing. Those pictures, it's historic. Yeah.
I remember from meeting you, there was one particular moment that I came across you because I follow some other activists that I've actually had on here. Elizabeth Lozano, Brandon Mack.
Yep.
And I've had someone from I think it's Kathy McDougal from
Surge.
Surge. And so I came across your video and not post, and it was about a particular incident that was happening in your school district. Can you tell them a little bit more? Because I know about it, but I want them to hear from you.
Which one was it? Because there are many now, sadly.
I think the first one was about students being discriminated against in the high school, and the second one was with the little boy that had the marker incident.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there have been multiple instances of recently. I mean, I think the one that has captured most attention was the young man who had the Sharpie to the head. And he actually was in school with my daughters at Barry Miller Junior High. And there was an administrator there who had just recently been promoted from vice principal to principal. And he was the man who basically orchestrated this. He told this young man that he was in violation of school dress code because he had this design etched into his hair. And so he took him to the office, and there were apparently a couple of other women there also who were witness to this or who were involved in this. And he told the child that he would be receiving in-school suspension as a consequence for
having a Z
yes
haircut in a Z part in his hair.
Right. For having this design. I mean, it kind of looked like a cursive M or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a pretty design. I didn't think it was particularly distracting, but but anyway, he said that this is a violation of school dress code. He would be suspended, or he would give him the option of having the design colored in with a black Sharpie. And the student, I mean, he's a child, right? He's like 12 or 13 years old, and he had never been in trouble before, and so he chose to have his head colored in. And his parents were
he didn't want to be away from his friends. He didn't want to be away from his teachers or be behind in school.
Yeah, or get in trouble.
Or go home and tell his parents, "Oh, I went to in-school suspension today."
Right. So they did not consult his parents. They just gave him this false choice, really, in my opinion. And he chose to get his head colored in. And so then the principal, I don't think he was directly involved, but he instructed a couple of the women in the room to color his head.
Wait, hold on. Because I didn't see this in the newspapers.
Yeah.
A grown man took a young boy into the office, gave him a choice to color in his hair, and directed two women to do it, and they did it anyway?
Yes, they did it. They actually, supposedly one started and then either was having trouble or was uncomfortable, I imagine, doing this, and the other finished it. I mean, I've heard different versions of this story, and I've actually been in touch with the mom, but I've never spoken to the student directly. What I know is through her account, and that is from him, right? And I have no reason to not believe him. I don't see why he would make elements of this story up, right? So yeah, that's what he reported. And then supposedly there was somebody there who was watching and was kind of snickering or laughing as this was happening. I mean, the whole thing is so humiliating and dehumanizing. I was so appalled. And thankfully, I mean, the family was put in touch with a civil rights lawyer, and they filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the school district. And we brought a lot of attention to the story when it happened, because it was happening like right at a time where I was like, there are problems with discrimination in our district, particularly with anti-Blackness in our district. Yes. And so I was like, this illustrates the point that I'm trying to make, right? And so we tried to bring visibility to it. And then we had a second episode with another African-American student months later when the new school year began. He actually had his face shaved. So he had grown out his facial hair for religious reasons. Yeah. And he was told that if he didn't shave his face, then that which is a violation again of dress code, that he would not be able to be exempt from his finals. And he wanted his exemptions, but he also didn't feel comfortable doing that. And the nurse suggested to him, I guess this is again per his account, right? That she could do it for him. And before he had an opportunity to say no, she was shaving his face. And so
how old is he?
He is, gosh, now he's 16 or 17.
So you telling me he's a 15-year-old? He's a 9th or 10th grader?
Yeah, I think he was in 10th grade.
And nobody's calling a parent. No one's saying, "Hey, your son came to school with a beer today."
I don't think so. I mean, they discovered.
I'm sorry, I'm a teacher. I always call parents.
Right.
Whether it's good, bad, or I got questions.
I mean,
the same school?
Say that again.
Was this the same school or different school?
This was a different school in the district. This
okay.
was Dawson, which again, my older daughter was at Dawson when this happened. So yeah, I mean, this is happening, I think, much more pervasively than people know, because, you know, in most cases, I've been told when I ran for school board here, people told me, a lot of the Black families that I talked to as I was canvassing the various neighborhoods, they told me that this kind of thing is happening all of the time, but that people, because there's such a culture of retribution here, people don't feel comfortable. Yeah, they don't feel comfortable speaking up. The students, the families, the teachers, people do not feel comfortable speaking up, and that's pretty uniformly been the message. Especially from our Black families, but also from teachers, especially now in like the post-COVID era where teachers are now the vulnerable population, right? And they do not feel comfortable organizing, making any collective demands. They do not, they come to me privately, they'll send me private messages, but they do not feel comfortable being visible because of the retribution, really. You know, like.
So when you say retribution or revenge, what sorts of things are they doing to the students and to the teachers?
Yeah, I mean,
they speak up and say, "Hey, you know, this incident, I don't think this is the right decision to do, or I don't like how you're hurting my, you know, discriminating against my child." Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've heard so many different examples of this. A friend of mine is a physician in the district, also a physician parent, and she had, again, she's African American, and she had a daughter who has narcolepsy, and I actually did an interview with them actually on my community page on Facebook. But she has narcolepsy, and she had difficulty with getting her assignments done sometimes, or coming on time to class. Because she would fall asleep, right? And then, yeah. And so anyway, she had issues related to her medical diagnosis, and they discriminated against her. I mean, because of her medical diagnosis, right? And then when the mother became more visible about her objection to this, the daughter started noticing that, like, the way she was being treated had changed, right? Like in a not so favorable way. And so this kind of thing, and then teachers will tell me explicitly with this COVID that they have been threatened, their jobs have been threatened, their teaching certifications have been threatened. Yeah. And so, you know, it's people who are anecdotally reporting these things to me. And so as a scientist, I step back and I'm like, well, is this really universally happening? But, you know, the weight of the evidence, if I look across time and across the various people telling me, and also that it's very actually heavily weighted in when I talk about racial discrimination against Black families and understanding the history of anti-Blackness in our community, I see how it's very plausible, even though I don't have 10,000 pieces of evidence, right? I see how it is very plausible that what people are reporting to me is in fact true.
I'm sorry, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 10 years, and I'm just like, I guess because I always taught in the Houston area, in Aldine ISD and Houston ISD. And so I guess now because you are living in a suburb of Houston and you're in a suburban school district, and I'm always imagine that, oh, it's probably so much better in a suburban school district. And I'm just hearing about this blatant race, really not, I mean, you could say it's a racial microaggression, but racist incident. And seemingly, if you're in a higher socioeconomic class, that doesn't excuse them from students and being treated this way. And they're and the parents are being unable to actually get help. And then the teachers are being attacked. And I'm just like, wait a minute, this
Yeah.
can't be real. So, knowing all of this, and you decide to run for a position on the school board, what kind of, I want to say, support did you give, or maybe not so much support did you give when you were running for office?
Yeah, I mean, I was really alarmed. I had never run for any public office before, and frankly, the main reason I ran here is because there were 3 seats that would have gone unchallenged, and so I recruited at least one other person, and then I think a friend of mine recruited another, and we made sure that those seats did not go unchallenged. Because
that's good. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, all of us agree, the people who decided to run, that is not healthy for democracy to have seats go unchallenged. And so we stepped into it. We threw our hats into the ring. And, you know, when I step into something, even if I don't care for it per se, when I'm stepping in, right? Once I'm in, I'm really in. And so I was going to run a real campaign. I mean, like a congressional level campaign, right? I'm like, I'm going to raise twice as much as what they say I have to raise to win the school board race.
Because I saw you did the posting, and I was like, well, I know I can't vote in Pearland, but I'm going to share this with everybody. And I was like, hey, Pearland friends, vote for Dona. Vote for Dona.
I mean, I had a professional, I had a staff like who ran, I had a campaign manager. I had a number of volunteers who were either like routine, like paid staff, or they were kind of like who came in and kind of filled gaps for us. But, you know, I was super committed to paying people $15 an hour because as a professional, I live my values. And so I ran a real campaign. We touched, I think, 26,000 voters by either in person or by phone. And I mean, I think we did an extraordinary job. And along the way, we organized our community politically and really made them more aware of what was happening in the world around them, which was my goal. I mean, I didn't actually expect to win this, right? I expected to organize the community and to change the conversation. I did those things. So, or we did those things. I shouldn't say I did those things. We did those things collectively.
What was the final count?
Oh, it was awful. We were creamed. The incumbents won like 4,000 to like 1,500. I mean, it was, you know, plus or minus.
How many people live in Pearland?
Oh, there are like many tens of thousands of people who could have voted. But you know, the school board elections across the board are very poorly attended. Like people do not show up for school board elections. Local elections in general, it's really poor turnout, particularly when it's not like a mayoral election or city council election year. So anyway, I mean, it was very poor turnout. But what I was going to say to answer your previous question was that the reception to us running. So let me just describe to you who.
Well, I'm sorry. My friends are always telling me I'm attending over. So I just wanted one more thing. So did the 3 of you? So none of you won your seats?
No, we all got somewhere around 1,500 votes, and our opponents all got somewhere around 4,000 votes. I mean, we ran as a slate, so we kind of expected that.
But you did get the message out there. They did know, like you said, to change the conversation. Okay, because I was wondering, because you said Joseph Say was on the school board.
No, he wasn't. The 3 of us ran. So Joseph Say, who is half Latino and half Chinese American, and then the other candidate was he's a VP a vice principal, at Bel Air High School, but he lives here, and his wife is in the district. He's African American. So we had basically covered a bunch of different identities, right? We had so many perspectives, and professionally, we had the educator, we had Joseph, who is like a cybersecurity expert, an IT expert, and we had a physician, right? Like, how useful would those people have been on a board now trying to deal with COVID, right? Where they have to figure out what to do with IT. So that they reach all their students in remote learning. They have to figure out what to do with COVID right? And health risk. They have to figure out what to do with education and how you totally like pivot in what you're doing in education because everything has changed. I mean, it would have been so valuable, I think, to have these insights. It didn't have to be me, but it was me. I happened to be running, and I'm a physician who has these perspectives to bear. They have, collectively, we have all of these different perspectives to bear. And it was so unprofessional. Like the way we were treated, it was so unethical. All I could attribute this to is that they are very desperate. They know that it's coming, that they will be unseated eventually, and the people who have historically held power here will become irrelevant. And they don't have to be irrelevant, right? But they are writing themselves out of history because of how they govern. And so they were afraid. That's the only thing I can attribute this to, their behavior. I mean, I was called Dr. Wonton. The message on the street was that I wanted to kill, like I was okay with white children dying. I wanted to fire all white teachers. I am okay with pedophilia. I mean, I could not, I was like, what on earth? I couldn't believe. I mean, I was just in shock. I didn't know, and I wasn't going to like condescend to even responding to this, right? I was like, this is just, it's horrifying that people would actually believe these things are true.
Mm-hmm. I'm just...
And I will say that it was, and the guys will agree with me here, that a lot of this was directed towards me. So from that perspective, it was very misogynistic, right? They are going to attack me like nobody's business. And they did attack Joseph a bit. They stayed away from Al, our companion who ran with us. They didn't really attack him. Yeah.
I'm so sorry this happened to you, because I was just so excited. I was like, yes, it's going to be on the school board. It's going to be awesome. And I just didn't understand how, like, what you were dealing with. And I'm just like, I don't even know what does your husband and your kids think about you running?
I tried to shield them from most of it. I didn't, like to bring them into my daily stresses with running, with respect to running. We did have the campaign running out of our house. So that was stressful. I don't know that I would ever do that again, but it was inexpensive. It was the first time I had done it. So I didn't know how much of a burden it really would be on the other people in the household. But, for 5 months or whatever it was, to have, people who are relatively strangers to you in your house all the time, you can't just walk around without your pants on. It's just not comfortable. And so I think that was difficult. There were rare moments where I actually was concerned about the safety of my family because of some of the things that had happened and had been said. But, at the end of the day, I was like, I trust that people are not going to be that insane that they would actually try to harm us. So
were your daughters okay at school? Or was it like, oh, it's cool, my mom is running for school board? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
they didn't.
Or is it something like they never talk about you running for school board?
They didn't talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't expect them to. I was fine with that. They did come out with me and do some of the canvassing that I did and lit drops with me, and they were supportive, but I didn't push them. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's good. Hey, thank you everyone who's come in. Please like, share, subscribe. If you have other social medias, please share this out. That the guests that I interview on the show, they have really great information about how we can make changes in our community for the better. So please share this out. Hey, Simple Rashad, thanks for showing up. So since the first time you ran for school board, are you going to run again, or are you just going to go support another candidate?
I mean, right now I really am into supporting other candidates. I just launched with a couple of colleagues, Doctors in Politics, which is a political action committee that aspires to send 50 physicians to Congress in 2022.
Oh, okay. So if you can, do you see right there where it says private chat? Okay, can you put the link to that in the private chat, and then I will share that with everybody?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something that I've been spending my time on. I never, like I said, I never had really political ambition for myself. I still don't. I think of elected office as like a vehicle for change. And mostly I think that change is made on the outside of systems, not, or the most transformative change is made on the outside of systems, not on the inside. So I've not really ever wanted to be on the inside. I understand now with some time that it's important to have people on the inside to be receptive to the pressure from the outside. But I feel like I still do feel like most change happens on the outside of systems. And so I myself don't necessarily care to be on the inside. But that being said, I would never say never, right? Like I also didn't think I would run when I did for school board, but was convinced to do so. And I'm glad that I did. So yeah.
When is for those who may be watching who are in Pearland, when is the next school board election? Is it this November with all the other elections, or is it?
It is. So importantly for people watching in Pearland, they're very intentional about making sure the school board election is not with the November election normally, because it means that turnout will be lower and they can make sure that their people continue to turn out and elect the incumbents, or the people who have been placed there by the political machinery here. We have been arguing for them to push our elections for school board to November for some number of years now. This year, we did it because of COVID, right? We convinced them that this would be unsafe. It would be really irresponsible for them to go ahead and move forward with the May election when we were, increasing in the numbers of infections and deaths. And so they moved it. It wasn't universal, actually. When they voted on moving it, actually, no, I may be conflating the city council election now and the school board, but they did actually move the school board election to November. So on November 3rd, there will be 2 positions that are open. One of them will be Mike Floyd's position. I don't know if you know Mike, but he is the only progressive on a board of 7 right now. Everyone else is part of that political machinery that I talked about.
Okay.
So yeah, he's not running again. So that's an open seat.
Okay.
I know a couple of the people who are running. One of them I know better than the other that I know, but I think there are a few more actually. One of them is Jess Garcia Schaefer, and she's an epidemiologist from NASA and a parent in the district. And then the other is a gentleman, Chris Schaffler, maybe. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's a veterinarian. He's one of the people being put forth by the political machinery here. And then the others, I'm not sure. I think there's one name I think that is in there that actually always puts his name in to run. Actually, also was listed for running for Congress, interestingly. So I have a feeling that this is kind of a political, it's a politically calculated run. I think we need this guy to run over and over again.
Okay.
Positions.
Kind of like is he like the Kanye?
Exactly. So we have
he's just there to divert attention, take away votes from someone else, and just put him in there. Okay.
Yeah, so we have one of those here, it seems, anyway. And then the other position is...
Just let me know so I can tell my other friends who live in Pearland, like, hey, don't vote for this guy. He's the Kanye of the group.
Yeah, I would vote for Jess of the 2 of those.
Okay.
And then the other one is for the position for the president of the school board. So his name is Charles Gooden. And I think most notably where I've been very disappointed in his lack of action is when we went before the school board after all of these assaults, particularly directed against our Black students, and he's African American. We told them that it's really critical that we pass a declaration basically denouncing white supremacy. And he consistently voted against even discussing the matter. Right. So I'm not going to posit why that might be.
Like Charles Gooden?
Yes. And so there is a woman who's running against him named Tony Carter Pellis. And she is a parent in the district as well. And she's been politically pretty active. Yeah, so she's going to run against him. I know that she's been pretty vocal on like LGBT issues, and I think also on some of our racial injustice issues. I don't know if there's anyone else running there. It might just be the two of them. But yeah, we do have these elections. They are super critical. And I think now more than ever, as people, as families are grappling with school reopening, I hope they can appreciate that the leadership at the level of our school board is so, so critical. Yeah. I mean, it's just, people didn't get it before. You know, there is this cult of celebrity around who is president or who our congressperson is. But when you start talking about county commissioner's court or city council or school board, I think people's eyes glaze over, right? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know who those people are.
So the thing is, a lot of the local government, the independent school districts, the counties, the city councils, those are the most interaction that people have with government every day of their life is at this level.
Yep.
And for us to only be worried about who's in either the Texas Congress or the U.S. Congress or the presidency, is like, hey, you guys need to work on the lower levels. And I think right now, this last midterm election after 2016, we realized like, oh, we couldn't do a lot of things at the national level. Let's look at the local level.
Right.
And that's how we get a much better momentum and get more changes.
Right.
So, I wanted to ask you, hey everyone, thank you guys. You're exactly correct. Rashad is very more important. Is there anything else you want to add or anything else that's on your mind that you want everyone to know?
Gosh, well, with respect to the questions that you've asked me so far, I mean, I really hope, I mean, my call to action to people is like, definitely, November is coming. November 3rd, make sure that you vote in the election and make sure that you vote down ballot in the election. There is no longer straight ticket voting. So you have to individually mark everyone. For school board elections and for city council elections, those are supposedly nonpartisan. I ran a very nonpartisan race, although the way I fall on issues is very conservative, very progressive. What I was going to say though is that school board and city council, they do not mark partisanship. So you're not going to know unless you actually do the research, like who is it?
Okay.
So you have to do a little bit of due diligence there beforehand. That's what I would call to people in the medium term. And then I think in the long term, we really have to reinvest in our communities and in each other. I think that the problems that we see, the crisis in leadership that we see nationally and at all other levels of government, this is because we have stopped paying attention. And it is in large part by design, right? Because the people who are incumbents, the people who have historically held power, they have decided, especially in Texas, that they don't want to invest in, for instance, civic literacy, right? They don't want you to understand who has power, who holds power in your community and who you go to when you have an issue, because that makes their lives more difficult. Right. So they don't want people to know how to do that, how to engage with the systems around them. So I think if people with a longer term vision can think, I need to figure those things out, because obviously I haven't been taught through school. I need to figure those things out and to make that a priority and start really reinvesting in the community around me, and understanding what's happening so that I can advocate, in the right way. So that's the message that I would leave, I think.
And I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. It's just that, I don't know, sometimes I feel like we're just talking to ourselves, and do other people, are they listening?
Right.
Are y'all listening?
Yeah.
But I think a lot more people are listening. We just want the work to be quicker, but, maybe, what is it? Like someone else said the other day, it's a marathon, not a sprint or something like that. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's hard with those kinds of adages, because it's like the people who are suffering, to extend their suffering even a minute more, right? It feels very, very unjust. but we live in a democracy, for better or worse. And so it becomes the responsibility of those who are suffering and those who are in allyship with them or accomplishment with them, right? As we say, it becomes our responsibility to try to push the system to change as quickly as possible. Acknowledging that because we live in a democracy, other voices will be at that table, obviously. And it might not come as quickly as we'd like. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I wanted to speak on a very, I know it's going to be very personal. The first thing I wanted to ask, because for those who didn't know, well, the first question I was going to ask, because you are a doctor and you are Asian American. I know that even though you said you are Koreans, families from South Korea, second generation, I do know from my other Asian friends who are from there that they're often mistaken for Chinese or Chinese American. And so I wonder, did you have instances like that when more and more people began getting COVID-19 and they kept saying, oh, it started in China and now it's moving over here, here, and here? Because I know for me personally, I started fearing for you, one of my sorority sisters, several of my sorority sisters, my students who are Asian American, because I'm just like, what if some crazy person comes up to them and does something crazy? And I keep reading these articles of these instances, and I'm just like, and then the president is saying stuff too. I'm just like, oh Lord. So I want to know, like, did you encounter any of that, or did your daughters encounter any of that? And what did you do when those things happened?
Yeah, so I have not personally been targeted in that way during COVID. My daughter actually was discriminated against at Dawson High School prior to COVID. But nothing has happened since. I mean, we've been out of school, right? So there's not really been an opportunity for them to discriminate against us in that way. And we also don't leave the house very often. So again, not a lot of opportunity for people to be discriminatory against us. I mean, I have read about it. I know a lot of organizations are doing advocacy around it because there have been so many people affected. I haven't encountered it. And I guess I am a little bit surprised by that because of the discrimination that Alice faced when she was at Dawson. Like, very briefly, the incident was that she was sitting in a classroom where a teacher came in just for a couple of minutes to keep an eye on the class as their teacher went to the bathroom. And that teacher basically called Alice out by her race. He pointed to her and said, "Hey, Asian girl, can you tell me what this thing means, this thing written on the board?" And she was like, why did he choose to call me out by race and not by like the color of my shirt or something? Like, I understand he doesn't know my name, but why am I
Or race? Hey girl sitting in the front seat.
Right.
Or hey girl with the...
Right. And then when she was like totally flustered, like she doesn't like to speak publicly anyway. But then when she's called out, like all of the sudden, she just didn't, she froze. She didn't know the answer, even though she knew the answer, she couldn't say it. Right. And so then he said, "Oh, well, you don't fit the stereotype. Hey, Indian boy." And there's a young man sitting next to her. "Hey, Indian boy, what does this thing mean?" And he apparently didn't know the answer either. And he again stated, "Well, like, you guys don't fit the stereotype." And when the teacher returned to the room, he said,
Wait. Was this, I hate to say it, was this a math class?
It was not a math class. It was
English?
Geography. It was
geography.
Social studies kind of class. Yeah. Yeah. And the teacher returns to the room, and this other man says to her as he's leaving the room, kind of jokingly, "These kids don't fit the stereotype. They're not actually really that smart." And I was like, wow, that's just, I mean, and so, I ended up having a conversation with my daughter about like the model minority myth. We talked about discrimination in general, and we had been having those conversations because of the assault of Black students in the district, right? And so, so we had already been talking about these things, and we talked about also kind of the relative egregiousness also about what she faced and what some of our Black students face. So these conversations I think are super important to have, especially in Asian American communities, because there's a lot of anti-Blackness in our communities. And so we talked about all of this, but she faced that at that time. But, you know, since COVID, we have not. And I think maybe that's just for lack of opportunity, you know, like maybe if you're out there.
I had a friend of mine, she's Caucasian, but she adopted 2 children from Asia. And she said one of her kids is not doing good in her math class. And someone the teacher made a comment about, well, you're supposed to know, be good. You guys are supposed to be good at math. And I'm just like, because I'm like, you ask the question, like the teacher's like, what does this mean? And I'm thinking, like, is he asking? What is he asking? Like, oh Lord, is this another incident in a math class?
Yeah.
You're asking the Asian student what the. Yeah, I'm just. Oh Lord, why do we say these things to our children? Other people's children.
Yeah, and in this district, I mean, we have a superintendent who wrote a blog post on how Chinese people work so hard and they're so smart. And I'm just like, look, that is actually a real disservice to everyone to hold that kind of.
Does that mean everyone else doesn't?
Exactly.
And did they want you to write this article about them? Like, particularly, like.
But, you know, the unfortunate thing is that there are people in among Asian Americans who actually really embrace that model minority myth, right? And it's really problematic. It ends up being a real wedge, I think, in building multiracial community with other groups, namely with Black Americans, right? Who have suffered historic discrimination here. And really, when that model minority myth was invented, it was in contrast to African Americans. That's how it was contextualized. And it's caused a lot of problems since, I think, between communities that are Asian American and Black Americans. You know, the Korean Americans have had specific conflicts because of the LA riots, right? That's still something I think that our communities are trying to heal from collectively. Yeah, so it's a lot of work to do.
Yeah. I was going to say, speaking of the idea of the model minority, I know one of my friends, I'd say, sound like some people would say, oh, I hate to sound like some white people would say, oh, my Black friend. And I'm saying my Asian friend. It was my sorority sister. And I was reading some things. It said, is there really, and it was from a doctor standpoint, and we can also answer this too, because the model minority myth, model, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Is there really a higher rate of suicide or maybe depression or anxiety?
That's a good question. I mean, certainly we have a problem with, I think, dealing with mental health issues in our communities. I think culturally, it is true across a lot of Asian American cultures that there are really high educational expectations and very particular ones too. So when you talk about this idea that a lot of people say, you know, where their parents expect them to be a doctor or lawyer or engineer or whatever, right? Like, I think that is true for many people. And it's pretty misguided, you know, like there are people amongst Asian Americans who are going to be a lot better served and will serve a lot better, serve society a lot better in, you know, as artists or in various other capacities. But when we pigeonhole them like this, right? When we say that this is the expectation, this is what we know to be true about Asian people, right? It should be true. Why aren't you meeting that expectation? That's not good for your mental health and well-being. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it has some kind of implication there for teen suicides among Asian Americans. I know, I remember very distinctly the one suicide that I heard about at Harvard when I was there was a Korean American student. And so, you know, it wouldn't surprise me, but I actually am not familiar with those numbers. And I'm pretty familiar with teen suicide because we had a really high rate of it have a really high rate of it in Pearland.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm pretty familiar with those numbers, and I hadn't really heard that.
I always tell my because I still have like African American students will say, "Oh, um, the Asian students or whatever, they don't have it as bad as us." And I'm like, you don't understand. They're from a culture with high expectations, and some are coming from an immigrant experience. And just because it looks like they have it together doesn't mean that they are. There are high rates of suicide.
Yeah, I mean,
so you can't say, "Oh, they all have it better than you."
Right.
No.
I mean, I think it is fair to say, like, that certain communities in the United States have been historically disadvantaged in very distinct ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
The indigenous people here, people who came here originally enslaved, right? Like, this is a very different experience that comes with a whole host of intergenerational trauma and other issues, right? Historic issues that we have not faced. Now, that being said, Asian Americans were the first people that they explicitly discriminated against in immigration law, right?
Yeah.
They like wrote us out of the country. But that's not to say that other people had not been written out of this country prior to us, or in just as egregious, if not more egregious ways, right? So I think that our struggles are different. And I think, I mean, I hate to compare like that, because I think that they're all bad. Like it's all bad, and we should fight against all of these injustices. And I think we're much more powerful fighting together than we are fighting alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to be acting as allies, not as competition, not playing the racial Olympics or the racial oppression Olympics. Because that's what I would tell my students. They're like, can we not try to play, racial oppression politics or oppression right now? We all got it bad in some way.
Yeah.
And we need to be working together.
Yeah, it's very tricky for me, because I think that people do have to understand that the experience for some groups is it's so much different than for other groups. At the same time, I think on an individual level, I think you have to understand that people are facing all kinds of race-related and non-race related struggles in their lives, right? At the individual level. But at the societal level, there are very important distinctions that I don't think we should erase between the struggles that we've historically faced, right? And so I'm often trying to educate young Asian American people about that, right? Because often I think you see your struggle as like the most profound struggle, especially when you're young. But I think people need to understand history here in the U.S., and I mean, we're newer, relatively speaking, as immigrants to this country. And there were those who did not come as immigrants. There were those who actually occupied this land before anyone else got to colonize it. And there were those who came here enslaved. And I think it is so critical that people understand the differences. Yeah,
they do.
Yeah.
One of the last things I wanted you to talk about, if it's okay with you, because I'd asked you at the beginning of the program how you've been doing. You said, "I'm okay considering I'm a little tired. I've been recovering from COVID." And I'm just like, my mouth was open. My friends already told me, "Close your mouth." My mouth was open. I was just like, if I had known, I would have like I said, I would have been throwing a blanket over you, asking you need warm tea or hot tea or coffee, or you need me to put your feet up, because I'm just like, I want you to be better. Can you tell us, because you are a doctor, when did you find? Okay, let me ask you to go a little farther. When did you know, as a doctor, that this COVID-19 was not just like, oh, this is flu season?
Oh, it's when actually, I mean, I don't know that it was in my role as a doctor. It was actually
or your role as a mom, or.
Yeah, it was a friend of mine who does a lot of community organizing as well, especially among Chinese Americans. You may know her too, Helen. Do you know her?
I think I've heard her name several times.
Yeah, so she's here in Pearland as well, and she was talking to me in January about about people in her family who were affected in Wuhan. So
Wow.
I knew at that time, this is unusual what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really affecting people that I know. And then towards the end of January and into February, I became increasingly concerned that this was going to be a problem. By the end of February, I was talking to my daughter about absence policy in the district. And I was like, what is the district going to do? You guys are punished for not coming to school. You're not allowed to exempt your finals. And she got very upset by this and started a petition to demand that the school district, in anticipation of the COVID pandemic, actually change its absence policy, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she got like 300 signatures. She did a great job. Yeah, and they did. They did change.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
She learned from mom. Like, okay.
Right. So then, yeah, I mean, I was aware of it, you know, ahead of time. I think at the same time that the U.S. government, federal government, got wind of it and had the opportunity to really do some meaningful things in preparing for it, which they failed to do. Yeah.
So when did you find out, or how did you find out that you had COVID-19?
My sister told me. So my sister, as I told you, is she's a resident now in ophthalmology. She at the time was doing her internship, and I spent some days with her. And she told me, I asked her, like, have you had any
experience? At the hospital, or just
I didn't spend time with her at the hospital, but she was spending time at the hospital with sick patients.
But you were with her, like hanging out with her at her place? Okay.
Yes. Unprotected, not at that time, not yet masking or social distance, none of that, right? Okay. This was in March. And March. Yeah. And so she told me, I asked her explicitly, are there people with COVID? Are you treating people with COVID or suspected COVID or anything? She's like, no, nobody has that in our community. And I was like, I don't believe you, but okay. Have you been around people who are sick? And she's like, well, I mean, we have one patient who has fever that we don't really know why they have fever, and they have a bilateral pneumonia that, and I was like, makes me feel a little bit nervous. And this person, she didn't protect herself against, because they decided that this was maybe their underlying illness, related to their underlying illness, which it could have been for what they have as their underlying illness. And so they did not treat this person as a COVID.
So they were not wearing the PPE?
No. And days after she started caring for this person, my sister had a fever, and then she had a couple of weeks of fatigue. But that was it for her. I mean, I've had many more symptoms than that, and I've been sick for far longer, right? I'm one of what they call those long COVID patients. Like I'm 5 months out now. Okay. And I just had brain vessel imaging done on Monday because of new symptoms.
Okay. So when did your sister call you and say, sis, are you sitting down? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be funny. I'm really being serious. Like, what did she say? Sis, are you sitting down? I got some news to tell you.
She told me as soon as she had a fever. She said, you know, we don't know what this is or why I have a fever. It could have come from, you know, anywhere, but it could have come from this patient. We haven't tested this patient, and ultimately they never tested that patient. They sent that patient home without testing. Because at the time,
but that patient could have infected their whole.
Yep. At the time, that community, I'm very deliberate about not saying where she was. And at the time, that community supposedly had no infections, and that institution was not doing any testing. It wasn't that they were doing not a lot of testing. They were doing zero testing at that time. And so we got no testing confirmation. I tried to get testing earlier than I was able to get it, but I didn't indicate there that I was somebody who had interactions with patients, because while I am a physician, all of my work is remote. And so I was like, I'm not those classic frontline workers that are priority. I don't want to bump someone out of the way. And I'm pretty sure I have this because I have educated myself and other people extensively on this. So I was like, I just need to isolate myself. I don't need a diagnosis. But finally, I did actually get access to a test, but I took it so late that it came back negative. And so yeah, then for the next, I was sick for a month. I mean, I was in bed for like.
Even though the test said negative?
Yeah. So what happens is that if you wait too long, the viral load goes down. Your infectivity actually also is thought to go down when your viral load decreases. And so it won't actually show up as positive on the tests. So the tests that are commercially available, there is a high false negative rate. We estimate still around 20-30%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're having all these symptoms. Did you go and take a blood? I don't know if you can take a blood test to follow up that test.
No, I never did the antibody test properly.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't do it. I don't see the value in it, quite honestly, because we're not sure that even if you have antibodies, for how long you will have them. And if you have them, are they actually protective and to what extent? We have no idea. And so why then am I just going to do another test to tell me yes or no? And we don't know the meaning, right? Like, so no. And
I don't mean to cut you off. Can you turn your light on? Do you have a light on your desk?
Yes, hang on a second.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. I started seeing less and less of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I haven't repeated the test for those reasons, but I mean, I have like a bunch of physician friends who have followed very closely my whole course, and they are all 100% convinced that I have it, right? And I'm convinced from what I know of it.
So you didn't go back to a doctor? Well, I guess they're all doing telemedicine now.
Yeah.
So to get official confirmation that you have COVID.
No, because, once you're well into it, it's very unlikely that you're going to test positive again. So yeah, I mean, I've had fluctuating symptoms. And so this last time when I actually had a sudden neurological symptom, my doctor my PCP suggested that, if I want to, I can go and try to get that test redone. And maybe it will be positive. And I just thought, for what purpose? I'm going to go sit and wait for hours so that they can tell me what I already know. I mean, there is no cure for this. There's no therapy for this. There's nothing for it. So I mean, for me, I just don't want to infect other people, right? So I'm very careful. I really don't leave my house, honestly. So
what about your husband and your kids?
They've been okay. My husband never exhibited any symptoms. My younger daughter also hasn't exhibited any symptoms. I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure, that my older daughter had it as well, because she had several weeks of like really profound fatigue and drowsiness, and also had some upper respiratory and GI symptoms. So yeah.
So do you stay in one part of the house and they're in another part of the house? Like how do they wear masks around you? Or
yeah, for that first 28 days, it was literally like exactly like a month. I did stay in my room, like in the master bedroom, and my husband relocated to our guest bedroom. I think thankfully we have multiple rooms in the house. I mean, this issue of like multi-generational homes and how it becomes very difficult to isolate it just kills me. It really breaks my heart. But we were privileged enough that we could do that in our house. And so I stayed in the master bedroom by myself 90% of the time for a month. And I came out, maybe once a day to go outside for a little bit, or maybe to sit by myself, like in the living room, and like, wash my hands before going out there and wash my hands often. Yeah, I mean, I was minimally interacting with my family for 28 days. But after that time and the reading that I had done, the resolution of my symptoms, at least transiently for the next 3 weeks following those 4 weeks, I figured I'm safe to interact with my family. And so I kind of, I am now just normal, walking around my home normally. I mean, at this point, I think if the rest of my family doesn't, get it, they're probably not going to get it. Like,
what about your daughter? Is she okay? Did she have to self-isolate in the room too?
Yeah. So when she had it, I don't think she actually did. She didn't go out. We didn't go out of the house for many weeks. But I don't think she was as cautious as I was. I mean, I don't know, because I was in my room, but I didn't instruct her that she couldn't leave her room. I mean, when she first started having symptoms, it wasn't totally clear, because she was like tired. And she would sleep, instead of like her usual 8 or 9 hours, she would sleep like 12.
Okay.
But it wasn't like me, where I had some of the respiratory symptoms. I had a little bit of a shortness of breath. I had a bunch of the kind of syndrome of what we know to be COVID. And she didn't have all of that, at least not at first. Yeah.
So is she in a long haul with you, or is she done?
No, she just had she just had a couple of weeks of fatigue and drowsiness. Like I said, a few of those other symptoms, and then she's fine now.
Do you know if she still? Well, I don't know if she needs. Does she need to have a test, or did she have a test?
She never had the test, because I went to test and I was like, you have been around no one but me and my husband and my daughter, right? And so I was like, I'm pretty sure that you have this. There's nothing else you can have if you have anything, right? And so, yeah.
So do you guys pretty much still continue to stay inside and don't go out? Do you get everything delivered?
My husband actually will go to the grocery store.
Okay.
But yeah, he's been wearing a mask since I got sick, since March. And when I was sick, actually the first 28 days, he did not leave the home. At that time, we had people delivering to us, just because I was super worried that he was going to spread my illness. Now that I've been out for a long time, I mean, again, people don't know. So I guess technically I might be spreading virus or capable of doing that. But yeah.
But you don't leave your house, like you said. You don't leave your house.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not leaving my house.
You're just doing the same thing. You're staying home.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I will go, you can go out safely, like if you're not with other people, right? So you can go outdoors and walk around, and I mask typically when I go out to even do that. But I'm not anywhere near people. Like I'm going for a walk by myself, and yeah.
What do you would like to say to people out there who say that this disease is a hoax?
Oh my gosh.
There are people who say this disease is a hoax. I just had someone on Twitter the other day told Alyssa Milano, who said she has COVID-19, she's doing a long haul like you. He told her that her disease that she's suffering from was a hoax. And that the government shouldn't be telling us to wear masks. And that I think the man said, oh, you need to read the Constitution. We have a thing called freedom of expression. I told him he needs to read the Constitution again, because there's nothing that says freedom of expression in the First Amendment. So
yeah, some of this I think we're never going to change, right? There's a whole like anti-vax movement, for instance, right? There are people I think who are always going to believe in conspiracies, who will always be anti-science, and it will be near impossible to educate that out of them. In this case, I feel, unfortunately, that the lack of leadership from above and the mixed messaging has really created far more people who believe this kind of thing than we ought to have right now. And it's very, very dangerous. I mean, we talk about the pandemic, but there is an infodemic, right? And the WHO talks about this. People at Johns Hopkins who were modeling pandemic response a year ago talked about infodemics and the problem with misinformation and disinformation, especially with the pervasiveness of social media. And we knew this was coming. And I think there are steps that we can take that we should have taken before, but we can still take to make sure that we reduce the amount of harm caused by misinformation and disinformation, right? The difference being that disinformation is deliberate, right? And misinformation is not intentional.
Yeah. Do you have suggest some websites that people can read upon that are reliable sources about COVID-19?
Yeah. So one, this is not really reading up on COVID-19, but understanding like the community spread for your particular community, because you can look it up by county, is the Johns Hopkins website.
Okay.
And I might have it up. I can drop it I can drop the map for you.
Okay.
it's very powerful because it's updated daily and it shows you by county how much community transmission there is of COVID. That really is what we should tie school opening to. What we should tie opening of businesses to is the rate of community transmission. It doesn't make sense otherwise. There are a lot of arbitrary decisions that are being made about, like, let's start on this date. Oh, okay, that's not a good idea. Let's just push it back 12 days. Or let's push it back this number of days. And it really makes no sense. I mean, it should be tied explicitly to how common that disease is in your area, because that will indicate how much transmission you'll get once you open those schools, how fast that fire is going to spread. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a good resource. The other one is one that I'd have to look it up real quick, but I can. It's a community actually that we started on Facebook, a digital community called Data Driven Community COVID-19 Response. And the idea here is that really we are going to converge upon the most relevant answers, and the answers that are closest, the closest approximation of truth when we come together in a diverse and inclusive community that does have a fair number of quote unquote experts in that community, embedded within that community. So this group has a very large number of physicians, of public health officials, and it has the public at large. So I can share that link with you as well.
Okay. Thank you. So we can, because I'm all about my channel making sure that people are leaving with more information than what they came with.
Yep.
A lot like my classroom. I want you to know more when you leave here than when you came with, because there are people I think who are really doing a disservice and they're putting people at risk. Not wanting to cover your mouth when you go to the grocery store. And you're mad because the store refuses to serve you. And I'm like, no shoes, no shirt, no service. I mean, what happened to that? I mean,
right, exactly.
So, okay, here's to what is this first one called?
The Facebook.com one.
Yeah, Facebook, yeah.
Yeah, that one is the link to Data Driven Community COVID-19 Response, which is a Facebook group that is a public group. And we have, like, I don't know, somewhere 13,000 or 14,000 people in there now. But it's really been helpful. I mean, I think it's really interesting what happens when you put a diverse and inclusive group together. A lot of things that you don't necessarily imagine, a lot of information that you might never have had access to otherwise. Mm-hmm. And with something like a pandemic where we really don't understand, where we're learning in real time about this virus, it can be very confusing if you're trying to consume information that is out there without a little bit of guidance. And people who have a commitment to understanding science, so that's what that is.
Should people look at the CDC rules, CDC guidelines?
Yeah, I mean, I think that can be helpful for sure. I've not been 100% pleased with the CDC on a number of things, but I think it's a reasonable place to start. I mean, for instance, they've taken a position on asylum policy that we should deny entry to all asylum seekers indefinitely because of COVID. We don't know what's happening with COVID. They're basically using public health as a vehicle to deny people their legal right to asylum in the United States. And this is something that Stephen Miller, and who's been advising Trump.
Oh Lord, he's so problematic. It's just
right. I mean, this is something that he has put out there long ago, years ago, right? That we can use public health as a way to exclude people from coming into this country. And now
we've done it in the past. We've done that. That was the whole reason ICE was even created in the 1950s. It was to I think it was or was it the 30s? I think it was like I read it was an agreement with Mexico because we were in need of people to I think it was the Great. Well, I'm sorry, I think I'm mixing my decades up. We did have an agreement with Mexico. ICE was created around like the 1950s. I think it was called Operation Wetback, and we basically got to get everyone screened. And when you get screened, there's screening for if you got lice, ticks, a cough, or anything. And if you have all that, you can't come in.
Right.
And if the other ones pass through, you can come in here and work and then leave. And so it was just, using public health. We've been doing it for almost 70 years.
Yeah. I mean, this is so crazy.
It's horrible.
This is part of why, I was motivated to create Doctors in Politics, is like, we should be on the right side of these issues. And I think for too long, doctors have been on the wrong side.
Let me put that back in there too, in case some people didn't get Doctors in Politics.
Yeah.
So, how long do you think, you say you're in the long haul? So what does that mean? Like, are you going to have this another month, another 3 months, another 6 months?
We don't know, right? And that's what really kills me about this reopening, and also any conversation around COVID being about death. I'm like, yeah, a lot of people are dying from COVID, but there is just going to be untold disability from
That's what I'm worried about. It's like, how many people who are going to still have respiratory problems, fatigue, from having COVID. Also, I'm worried about people's mental health from being inside all the time. Like me, I'm an introvert, so like, I can stay inside. I'm cool. I'm fine. But my extrovert friends, they're not doing good.
Right. Yeah, these are very serious issues. What makes me upset is that I feel like a lot of people are on different sides of these issues, depending on where they fall politically in terms of partisanship, right? And this is really unfortunate to me. These are real conversations that we have to be having about, yes, people's physical health, but also their mental health and the various ways that's impacted both by COVID directly. I can tell you that I'm pretty sure that I've had some mood-related symptoms that are directly the impact of COVID in my brain, right? So we could talk about those, but we could also talk about the mental health implications for people who are now confined to their homes, right? Those are also just as real. To deny that, I think, is problematic. The economic implications, right? And how the economic implications are tied to the disease itself, and how devastating the disease can be when you're not controlling it, when you're not you don't have the leadership that is taking appropriate action to control it. The economic consequences are very real. And I don't think that we should be trying to pit a conversation about life and death and COVID against economic concerns. These things are all interrelated.
I forgot to ask you that. I was so frustrated when the governor of the state, Greg Abbott, was like, "Oh, we're gonna open back up in phases," and I'm like, "In phases? Like, I live in Harris County. We have the highest number of cases. I live in Houston. We still have the highest number of cases." And it was like he was steady undermining Judge Lena Hidalgo and Mayor Sylvester Turner. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of his phase, our numbers went back up, and then he had to close the state again. And now all of a sudden, I think he undermined us when he said, "Oh, everyone has to wear a mask when they're out." And he was like, "Oh, you can't enforce the mask." But what does he do this past week? Tell states, "Hey, people who don't wear their masks, fine them." I'm like, wait a minute, now you're on the same board with us? But then I'm like, what about if you're homeless? You don't have a mask.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying also.
Now you're going to criminalize not wearing a mask now?
Right. Yeah, no, this is the concern that I've had about school reopening, right? Because if you look at their pattern of behavior, it's to not do the right thing. Tons of people get infected, tons of people die, and then you do the right thing. And I'm like, this is what's going to happen with school reopening. You're going to have a bunch of people go back, a bunch of people instantly get sick, a bunch of teachers who are out. And then you're going to say, now let's go to only remote learning, and you won't have teachers to teach. by remote.
And the thing is, a lot of people feel like, oh, these kids need to be in school, but it's like you've had almost 6 months before we come back to figure out a plan.
Right.
Like, why didn't the secretary, that's a whole other lady issue, Secretary of Education get all the superintendents or governors on board and like, hey, what are y'all doing for these schools? How are you going to get them PPEs? Who's going to pay for all that? And they're like, oh, only have, then I think something that the CDC said something about, oh, having so many kids or whatever in school. And then I'm just like, do you not understand what school is like?
Right.
I teach social studies. Our classes were always overloaded. 25, 30. One time I had 37 in a class.
Wow.
So I can't imagine having a class of 37 in the age of COVID. And parents, I know they want their kids to go back. They're not happy about it. I had one friend, I was kind of concerned because she was upset that her daughter was going to have to do, her school district decided to do online school. And I think also because, like, you know, she has to work. But at the same time, I was thinking, like, but your kid is going to be safe.
Right.
Some of these other kids, they're making them go back to school. You know? So I feel like we're in a catch-22, but it shouldn't be a catch-22. When it comes to, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's such a mess. I mean, if I think about it too much, it gets me depressed. I have to think about like where we go from here and how we can kind of collectively organize and make as much change as possible to mitigate the harm that these people are causing. A friend of mine actually wrote an op-ed about how there should be an official inquiry into the handling or the mishandling of this pandemic in our country.
Oh yeah.
I do think people need to be called. And you know, I'm very much against.
Do you have the link to that opinion article?
I might be able to find it. Hang on.
Okay.
I just I'm not someone who is into punitive justice. I'm very like anti-prison, immigration, detention, industrial. You know, but I do see the point that maybe these folks should be held criminally liable. I mean, so many people have died. I cannot, and this is so much of it is because of either incompetence or ignorance, or it's because of political calculation. These people are like, well, if I don't reopen, they're not going to vote for me because, you know, they don't get to go to their jobs. And I'm like, show some leadership, right? Like, that's the link to her op-ed about the inquiry. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, historians, sociologists, people will look back at this and just
it's gonna be. I'm gonna get things from probably my nieces and nephews, my little cousins. They're like, "What was 2020 like?" I'm just gonna have to sigh.
Seriously, and you know, it's so what.
I'm just gonna have to sigh.
Yeah. You know what kills me too? The other day I got super upset when I talk about like some of these like psych symptoms or mood related symptoms. I got super upset, like just thumbing through my Facebook news feed, and you know, it's so apparent to me, even going through my news feed, that this is disproportionately Black and brown lives. I'm just like, this is so devastating, right? And I got super upset about it. Like I got super depressed. I mean,
sometimes I have to not, even though like a lot of my friends, especially those in the social justice on Facebook, I have to like turn it away sometimes. And like, okay, I'll come back later.
Yeah.
You know. Is there anything else you want to add? I don't want to take you so long. I know you said you were tired. I was going to say, when do you get the news from you see you took a test, brain test?
Oh, yeah. It was fine. So, I mean, I'll share briefly because it was super trippy and interesting. I mean, I'm a neuroscientist. So to me, I was like, I'm kind of fascinated by it, but I think I'm having a stroke. So I went outside and tried to go for a walk, and I got winded just stepping off of my driveway. Okay. Like I was like, oh my God, I'm short of breath, and I've hardly started moving. And I forced myself to walk though for like 20, 30 minutes, and it got better. So I was like, well, maybe I'm fine. And then I came inside and I had chest pain, and it was not very strong. It was like very, very mild chest pain, but it was definitely present. And I was like, well, this is weird. And, I probably should call my doctor again. And then I was like tweeting or texting or something, right? I was on my phone, and, I had my thumbs up, like doing the message or whatever. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, like, why is my left hand like in that position, like it's oriented like that, and my thumb is there, and I felt very disconnected from my left hand. And this is actually something called alien hand syndrome in neurology, and it is most often because you're having a big stroke on the right side of your brain. And I was like, oh my God. And so I was really freaked out, and it lasted maybe like a minute, 2 minutes or something. Really profound, the feeling. And then afterwards, it lasted for several days. Now it's pretty much gone. But it was very restricted to that particular symptom. And so I was like, man, from what I know about the brain, this is either a stroke or it's a seizure. And because it kind of was there afterwards, that's not true of seizures. They like come and go in very short bouts. So it was like, and I would have this where I would like feel it for like many, many minutes, right? So I was like, I don't think that it is a seizure, but it could have been a small stroke, like a very small stroke. And so I went ahead and talked to a friend of mine who was a neurologist, and she was like, let's get some imaging done. But the imaging only images the large vessels, not small vessels.
Okay.
So the large vessels are clean, thankfully. But I had that symptom for several days. Like I said, it recently went away. So it was maybe about a week that I had the symptom. And it doesn't surprise me. The people who die from COVID, they find small blood vessel disease in the heart and in the lungs. So that does not surprise me if I did have like a tiny little stroke, right? Thankfully, it's like nobody notices, right? Only I noticed this very bizarre symptom. So I hope that I'm fine. Again, there's nothing I can do about it now because I contracted this thing, and it is what it is. So
how is your sister doing?
She has not had any further problems, to my knowledge. She had just a couple of weeks of fatigue and that 1 day of fever. That's it.
So is she totally free from COVID, or is she still like just asymptomatic at this point?
I mean, I don't know. She's not having symptoms, so I'm not sure if she's shedding still or what. Yeah, because we know so little about this. Yeah.
Does she go out?
She does. I mean, she takes care of patients. She's doing her residency. So, I mean,
do they finally got her PPE at the hospital?
She's in a different hospital now. I think she does have PPE.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I hate the fact that they said, oh, we don't think you need it. Oh, we think the patient has it. Maybe. I'm just like,
I know.
And they sent the patient home.
I mean, I was so freaked out. I was like, because this was not in Houston. Okay. So we actually took a plane. We should not have taken a plane at that time, but we took a plane there. But I checked like no community transmission in that area. I checked everything. We were super cautious that we probably shouldn't have gotten on a plane. But yeah, so when I found out that I had been exposed, I was like, oh my God, we're going to have to buy a car and drive back and camp along the way because we can't expose anyone else. Like, I was super, super freaked out about it. And at the time I was like, well, do we really have to go that far? Am I being melodramatic? I don't know. And so then I like called my friend who's an infectious disease specialist. I'm like, what do you think? And she's like, I think you're overreacting. Get back on the plane. Just make sure that you have your mouth and nose covered during the flight. Try not to touch anything. Wear gloves if you can. And she's like, you should be fine. Like, I trust that you're going to be fine. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know that that's actually the safest and most responsible thing to do. But my infectious disease friend just told me that I could. So I'm going to go with that because it's like, I mean, the idea of like, oh my God, buy a new car and drive several states, like, and camp along the way. I mean, it was just, yeah. Anyway, I did it to myself. We shouldn't have gone, but
okay.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you guys are taking precautions now, and like I said, stay home.
Yeah.
And if your husband goes out, he wears his mask.
Yep.
And so, well, I hope and pray that everything with your family goes okay. Someone has a question. Was there any numbness?
I've never experienced numbness, but actually people have. So like there in Wuhan, the first study on the neurological symptoms that people had, it was like up to 30% of a cohort of about 200 people had neurological symptoms, including what they call paresthesias, which can be numbness. So you can have that. Yeah.
Or do you guys have any more questions for Donna, Dr. Donna? Might be a slight delay. Y'all have any questions? We're on Facebook and YouTube.
Wow.
Are y'all speechless? Y'all usually have a lot more to say now. Are y'all sure? No questions? Well, I would definitely put the websites that you gave me into the chat.
Okay.
Again, and I will also put that in the description. Where did I? You said the one that was called the Data-Driven Community COVID Response. That was the Facebook group?
Right.
Okay. And
that's where you can learn a lot about COVID in conversation with experts, but also other people in the community, many of whom, have people that they know or they themselves have experienced symptoms.
Someone asked, are you a YouTuber as well?
I'm not. Actually, one of my friends asked me to start doing that. I haven't yet. So I don't have a channel. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe this is, hey, it's an opportunity for you to get the word out there.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if I have the energy for it right now. I'm like pulling back from everything because of the symptoms that I have. I mean, I have to sleep a lot more. I mean, it's just.
Okay.
Yeah.
What advice would you have to people who, well, just advice in general, to people who think, hey, this is a hoax, or to people who are not taking it as seriously as they probably should?
Okay, if this is people who are online who you don't know, I wouldn't really try very hard to convince them otherwise, because I think it's just not very useful, that conversation online. If it's people in your life that you actually know and you have some relationship with and leverage with, I think it's worth exploring why they think what they think, right? Rather than making assumptions about it and casting any judgment on it. I think it is important to explore why they think what they think, and then you have to kind of tailor your response to the reason they give for why they think what they think. Yeah, I mean, I think this has turned into such a politicized conversation that it's difficult. It's impossible, I think, to have the conversation online with people you don't know. But if it is people that you know, then there is potential there. There's opportunity there for you to convince them otherwise. And if you're in need of arming yourself with facts, like I said, that data-driven community COVID response is a great place to go. People certainly do ask for advice on how to deal with this kind of thing there. So yeah, it's a good resource.
Okay. Do you have a Cash App or PayPal? Do you have a Cash App or a PayPal?
I have a PayPal.
Okay, can you drop the link?
Sure.
In the chat?
A second. Oh, is the link by my email address? I don't know.
I think that's to sign in.
Let me see if I can get the link for you real quick. Hang on.
Okay.
I usually use like Venmo, but.
So I know my followers usually like to leave a little love offering, love note
nice.
to my interviewees. So
I will contribute it 100% to the various causes that I'm involved in. Oh,
okay, that's great.
Well, I'm not sure how you find what your link is on PayPal.
I think it's.
It may be my email. I think you can look it up by email, maybe. Can you look people up by email on there?
Yeah, but I think there's also one where it's. Why is mine not coming up? Okay. That's weird.
Yeah, you can.
Usually there's like a end thing at the end that says.
It says that you can send money by indicating their name, email, or their phone number. So I sent you my email that they can use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's Dr. Dona Kim Murphey's email address. So if you would like to bless her by going to PayPal, you can put in her email address and send her something, and she'll use that to donate to causes that she's involved in her community. So, anything else you want to say before we go?
I don't think so. Thank you very much for having.
All right, thank you so much for coming on here tonight, because I really didn't know about your health situation. So, and I know you said you're tired. So thank you so much for spending the hour and 47 minutes with me and my followers. Thank you so much. I'll keep you in prayer, and I probably will be checking on you. I probably will be annoying, just letting you know now. So
that's okay. I appreciate it.
All right, you're very welcome.
Okay.
Well, everyone, here's Dr. Dona's email address. So if you have PayPal, you can send her a PayPal, love offering. Also, I'll put the Pantsuit Nation in the chat, and I'll also put a lot of these links in my description for those who are probably going to catch the replay. So, but thank you so much, Dr. Dona Kim Murphey, for all the information about activism in the community and about COVID-19. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Like, share, subscribe with a friend on your social media pages. Dona, I will download this interview and I'll send you a Google link.
Great.
So that you can have it for yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, y'all.